Hello, guys, and welcome to a very cool video. This is actually one of the first I will have made on this channel. Uh, to start with introductions, my name is Scorpius Ultimate. You can call me Scorp. People usually call me Scorp, although I prefer to go by the call sign of Ray. And this is a very special video because this video I am going to be talking about a very anticipated topic, a topic so anticipated that a lot of people wanted to make a video on it, but then they got too bored and did not make a video. So this video is about factions, and not just what is a faction, but also what different types of factions exist and how do you advertise your faction. Basically, faction guide in a way. Um, of course, I will be making this in bits and pieces because there are so many things you need to know about a faction and how factions go that obviously you cannot do this in the span of one video. So we'll be talking about this in multiple videos. I'm guessing I might do a collab with some other people like Farad, for example, who's another faction nerd like me. So, anyways, moving forward to this topic, let us begin with the first question that might actually come to your mind, and that is, what is a faction? Basically, what is a faction? So, a faction, you could say, is an organization of people, right? In simple terms, it is an organization of people that are doing a specific goal or are entwined towards a specific goal that needs to be completed by them in you through teamwork and all that stuff. So that's basically what factions usually are. Now, what do they usually do in general, you might be thinking? So, of course, let's take the example of open world, because usually factions will touch open world, they will not really do anything other than open world and other types of open world. So, what do they do in general? Let's assume that you are a lowly rookie and you're doing stuff in open world, you raid bases, you do compounds. And let's say you have no friends. Like, let's hypothetically call you friendless, right? You have no friends, you're doing everything solo. Eventually, it gets boring, right? Because eventually, you will know where the enemies spawn, you will know where to hide to get the most kills. And so eventually, life will get boring. That is where factions come in. So you do things that are randomized. Enemy positions, different objectives, all that kind of stuff is randomized, meaning that you will not have a specific objective to do every single time, but instead each event you do will have a random objective that you may have to achieve. Say, for example, kill somebody, or defend somebody, or destroy a specific objective, or protect a specific objective, yada yada yada. Um, and you do this alongside your teammates, basically other people in the faction alongside you. Now, obviously, what kind of event is taking place depends mostly on the type of faction you are playing in. So, for example, casual factions will rely on overwhelming numbers and more casual approaches. So, basically, unconventional means of warfare in order to destroy the foes. While milsims will rely on quality over quantity and conventional means of warfare to outsmart the foe instead of just completely destroying the foe. Um, so yeah, they will use strategies. So obviously, though, all of them will have one thing in common, and that is that each of these factions will do a specific random objective, not just clearing an open world compound and then uh, grinding and then doing that kind of stuff. Although yes, it is one of the skill sets of a faction is to go to to be in a private server and grind stuff. That's one thing factions do, but it's not the major thing they do. There's a lot of things that they do other than just that. So that's what usually factions do, is that they are in a group of people, they do organized chaos, or they do quality chaos, and they basically clear objectives that are placed by them using RGE. What is RGE? Just a slight honorable question, you could say, because a lot of people get confused when someone says RGE or terms like this. And you'll come across these acronyms a lot of times, like RGE or SOP or something like what else? BT or BCT, etc., etc. So I'm just going to be going through the acronyms as well. So RGE, it stands for Real Time Game Editor. Without getting delving or going into it, it basically is like Roblox Studio, but for BRM5. You basically build stuff, you build compounds, you build stuff, basically, in short. So anyways, not pondering on RGE because I'm not a builder. I'm not going to be pondering on that. Let's move on to how can I advertise my faction? This is the main golden apple question because so many people come to fact discussion and either advertise their faction and then proceed to get warned by the nearby fact department officer, or they don't even know how to boost the server. So here's how you advertise your faction. There are a few rules you have to know when you're advertising your faction. There is rules like um advertisement guidelines and all that. But basically, in short, how do you advertise your faction? In order to advertise your faction, one of the means of advertising it can be FAQ advertising. What do you mean by FAQ advertising? Well, FAQ advertising is a channel. Yeah, it is a Discord channel on PL5. Not a YouTube channel. It's like you could say post channel, you know? So, yeah, it is a Discord channel. Uh, you know, it's like a post channel rather, where you submit posts. Don't mistake Discord channel with YouTube channel. YouTube channel is, I'm not even going to delve into that, forget that. Um, but anyways, yeah, it is a post channel where you can put a post of your advertisement in order to build advertise your faction. Um, the Discord channel can only be posted on by Nitro boosters. So in order to advertise your faction, you pretty much have to boost the server. Either it is a Nitro boost or it is a normal boost, whatever it is mostly just a boost. And only one boost is required to do the task. Boost will require actual money, so you will have to spend money in order to advertise. And overall, just a general tip. Actually, you know what? I'll save that for the later of the video. I'll keep you guys tuned in for that. So anyways, moving forward to advertising, once you actually manage to boost the PL5 server, you then need to post your advertisement using the post, you could say, feature in the post channel. Once you advertise, you need to click send, and once you do that, it should be sent in and people should be able to inspect that. Now, once they do, um, make sure to basically follow the advertisement guidelines. I'll be talking about what the advertisement guidelines are and all that kind of stuff in middle as well, but just make sure to read the guidelines as a heads up. I will be going over it though, don't worry. It is a very important aspect. Anyways, moving on to the next part of our thing is what do the tags on advertisement mean? Now, when you are delving into the advertisement or FAQ advertising, right? Um, Now there are other free options, but I'm just going to be focused on the FAQ advertising first. So when you are doing FAQ advertising, there are a few tags you have to put on your faction's post in order to describe what kind of faction it is. Say, for example, if it is a faction, so actually I'll be describing every single tag so it's easier for you guys. So, faction. What is faction? Basically, I already told you guys, faction is an organization. They do a couple of tasks, and then basically a set of goals and complete those goals, right? As simple as that. Now, there's another tag though, and that is community hub. Now, you might be thinking, what is a community hub? So, community hub is basically a group of people that, unlike faction, have a much bigger goal in mind. Not just a standalone goal, but more of a community goal. So, I can give you an example. For example, System 5, right? System 5 is a community hub. And System 5 um, sells maps, right? RGE maps for Robux to people. Same applies to Meme Store, right? Meme Store sells RGE maps to people. It is run by Meme Force One, right? Meme Store is run by Meme Force One, which is a faction which has a standalone goal. But Meme Store doesn't have a standalone goal. Meme Store has a community goal. And what's the community goal? To sell RGE maps or make RGE maps available to people, right? Or make their RGE maps available to people, if we're being more specific. Um, anyways, moving forward, another thing to note is that if you have a stand, is not to mess up the tags, because if you do mess up the tags, the faction department might catch that, and they don't usually like if you mess up the tags, stuff like, faction and community hub and stuff. So make sure you um, put the correct tag. If you're making a community hub to sell maps, put community hub. If you're making a standalone faction with a standalone goal, then put faction tag on it. Now, there's a lot of other tags we're going to look at, and if another one of those tags is the time zone tags. Now, obviously, everyone knows that the Earth is round. I'm sure there's no flat Earthists over there. I mean, in YouTube. This is in BRM5, right? So, what is these time zone tags? Basically, in easy terms, these tags represent the time zone. I mean, it's common sense to know that Asia Pacific will mean Asia and Oceania regions and time zones. Same way North American time zone is for, well, guess what? North America and Canada and, you know, countries near North American time zones. So, for example, EST, which is Eastern Standard Time, which is an American time zone, will use North America. So, for example, if let's say the example of Meme Force One, right? They're North American faction, so they will use the North America tag on their faction post whenever they are advertising. So remember that if you want, now there's one more tag you need to remember in this, and that is the global tag. Now, the global tag, pretty much as the name suggests, means that you are able to cater to all time zones. That is Asia Pacific, either all time zones or more than one time zone. So, for example, you're able to cater to Asia Pacific and also able to cater to Europe. For example, if let's take the example of Bella's group, right? Bella's group is a Russian faction, but they cater to Asia Pacific side as well, and they also cater to European side, right? They're a Russian faction that is European, slightly European dominated, but also caters to Asia Pacific side of things, meaning that they also have high command in Asia Pacific side of things, right? Uh, Either that or they pretty much are simply, well versed in the Asia Pacific time zone, meaning they interact with Asia Pacific factions quite a lot. So that is the time zone tags. One tip to you, please, in these tags is do not put the global tag if you're just starting off your faction. It is misleading. It is absolutely misleading, and it will pretty much get you shit on if people choose to join your faction since it says global and then see that you are not in their time zone. You will absolutely get shit on by those people. So my suggestion would be, if you're starting your faction, whichever time zone you're in. So, for example, I'm in the Asia Pacific time zone, right? So, if I'm making a faction, I would put the Asia Pacific time zone on it. So, that's one tip I would give so that people, so that you're able to interact with your own side of people. That way you do not have to worry about events not having people, events not having enough active people because they're sleeping and all that kind of stuff. So usually that's the case. Now, this is the time zone stuff, and this is pretty important. Yes, quite important. But there's another thing that is also pretty important, and that is the type of faction, the actual type of faction, right? Now, what is type of faction? So, type of faction basically it means there's three types of factions that you can be, and it basically there's a lot of stuff in it, like how your faction would interact, etc., etc. But I'm going to be giving the basics of what these three tags mean or actually mean. So of course I'll be making another second video if I can, delving more into these types of factions. But currently I'm just making a video for basics of factions so that people know what to do. So here's the three basic descriptions for these three types. First is casual. Casual is basically um it's like you use quantity over quality. So you rely on overwhelming numbers and you rely on basically loads of unconventional but fun methods. So, for example, if let's say an enemy is held up inside a room, I'm going to take the example of an enemy held up inside a room because it's much more understanding from there. So, a casual faction, if there was an enemy held up inside a room, a casual faction would just send body bag after body bag into that room until eventually the enemy has to reload and then you kill the enemy. So that is what casual factions do. That's the casual faction mindset, is that we're not going to rely on, keeping ourselves alive. We're more keen on having fun. So we're going to do a lot of fun methods. Although sometimes they do operations which may be stricter. So for example, casual faction by the name of IRRG, or International Rapid Response Group, they are casual. They do casual events. When they do casual events, they use unconventional methods. But when they're doing serious events, they use some form of minor conventional methods, right? So they don't die, basically. Um, Now, rules still have to be followed for each faction. Casual factions are slightly lenient on rules, but you'll notice that they will be pretty much adamant on following PL5's guidelines, because obviously every faction has to follow PL5 guidelines. Um, so yeah, and overall, they will not have a lot of restrictions, like for example, armory restrictions, uniform restrictions, etc., etc., vehicle restrictions. They will not have that kind of stuff. Usually, they won't, because they're casual. Um, so a few casual factions I can name, can be IRRG. Another casual faction I think is Ronograd Arcanist Militia. Um, so yeah, there's a lot. There's not a lot of casual factions. There's more semi-milsims, but yeah, there are casual factions out there nonetheless. So, anyways, moving forward to the next thing, which is milsims. Now, the word milsim is an acronym for military simulation. These are the absolute down bad pros, in short, basically. So these guys are the people that are going to be using realistic, real life tactics in battle. So let's take the room example, right? Let's say there are two people in the room and they need to breach the room and clear the enemy. So in a milsim, they would toss flashbangs or grenades inside the room, depending on if it's a hostage or whatever, and then they would do some things like center check, hook and cross, all that kind of stuff, and they also have all that kind of stuff. Now, milsims are pretty much identified by their distinctive SOPs. What is SOP? SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure. Basically, a document telling you how you do shit, right? It's a document that teaches you how to do a specific thing in a specific way. So, for example, there can be SOPs on, let's say, CQB, close quarters breach, or they can be even on covering and bounding, or they can be on, for example, let's take the example of C Squadron, right? They have an SOP on vehicle interdiction, which is basically using a helicopter to stop a vehicle or land vehicle, right? So it can either be ground vehicle interdiction or air vehicle interdiction, but basically, yeah, that's one part of their SOPs. Again, their SOPs will mostly be based on what they're designed for. So, for example, C Squadron is designed for vehicle interdiction, so they will have an SOP for vehicle interdiction. But there's one common SOPs all of these milsims will have, and that is CQB. Whether they choose to do dynamic or deliberate CQB, whichever is their pick or poison, uh, they will have an SOP on that, which will tell you how it is done. These milsims will also usually be invite only, either that or they will require an assessment in order for you to become a member. So something like an CQB assessment or bounding assessment or a general basic assessment. And yeah, that assessment will determine if you are worth being inside the group or not. Again, if they want you to be inside the group or not. So, uh, if you fail it, then they have every right in their hand to kick you from the group, obviously, because it is their Milsim group, obviously. Now moving forward, semi-milsim very quickly is just a serial, like just a mixture of the casual elements and milsim elements. Really, there is a lot of semi-milsims out there that work in very different ways. Some semi-milsims are more casual than they are milsim. Some semi-milsims are more milsim than they are casual, right? So obviously, I cannot really describe what a semi-milsim is, but semi-milsim will definitely have SOPs. Whether those SOPs are stringent or lenient is mostly up to the faction itself, and really I can't really describe it in a way. So that's what the tags are for. So if you're going for a more casual side, you want to grind more, like do Ronograd raiding more, and you want to LARP, but you don't want to LARP too much. You want to LARP just enough, right? Or you don't want to LARP at all, right? Either that or you want to LARP pretty little compared to like, semi-milsim milsim. Now, if you want to LARP a bit more, but you don't want to LARP too much, you don't want to be in the LARP soup, then semi-milsim is for you. But if you thrive in the LARP soup, if you want to be a milsim person, if you want to be truly into the milsim of it, then milsim is definitely for you. Of course, you can use a mixture of these tags and you will find the faction that you like. Or if you want, you can always go to fact discussion. There is a category for factions in PL5 Discord server. If you go there, there is a discussion group, a discussion channel called Fact Discussion. And that is basically the place where all the faction nerds will reside. So you can always go there, ask which faction is good, and they will recommend you a bunch of them. You can join whichever you want to. Next up is a few three very cool tags, and that is lore focused. Um, Lore focused means that the faction is going to focus more on lore aspects of the faction. So, for example, whichever mission you do, whatever you do, will be, you know, done in lore. So, for example, if you are in a mission and your commanding officer chose to destroy the bridge instead of protect it, that will change the lore. So the next time you play a mission, or your next mission, whichever mission it is, will pretty much have that change in it. So Yeah, that is pretty much what lore focused means. It's going to be focused on the lore. Beginner friendly. Beginner friendly is usually going to be friendly to beginners, pretty easy to understand. They're going to be explaining to the beginners how to play the game, how to use the basic mechanics, how to do HQ, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, um, and then last but not the least is experienced. By experienced, usually it means um, that the faction only takes people who have already gotten experience. So again, usually milsims will use this tag to say that you gotta be a more experienced individual in order to be part of the gang. Um, Now one more last tag that I did not touch actually is the region locked tag, and this is a tag that people get confused with using. So what does the region locked tag mean? So let's assume you are I'm not being racist here. I'm just using this as an example. Let's say you are a Russian faction, right? And you do not want any English speaking audience. You only want the Russian speaking audience. So then you can put EU and then you can put region locked in your tag. So that way, and not only do you put region locked in the tag, but you also have to put in your advertisement a disclaimer. A disclaimer should be that you only accept Russian speaking audience for your faction. If you are English speaking, you will not be accepted. Something like that. So disclaimer should always be present alongside the region locked tag so that people don't just see the tag and be, ignorant of it. They then, of course, see the disclaimer and then get kicked to their senses and understand that, yeah, this faction is region locked. I cannot join this faction because I don't speak Russian, right? Now, obviously, if you speak English or if you're an English speaking faction and you don't take any other speaking people, then you can, of course, put region lock tag. But mostly, you do not need the region lock tag if you're going for an English dominated faction, because English is going to be the preferred language for every single person that is joining factions in BR5. Because everybody knows English, everybody knows how to speak English, so obviously. But if you want a Russian speaking faction, for example, you can use the region lock tag, of course. Um, so that is the tags. You can, of course, make a combined uh, use of the tags. So you can, of course, use multiple tags at once. But there is a certain limit of tags you can use. So so you're only allowed to use, I think, around 5 tags at once. So you really need to choose wisely which tag you're going to use, right? And my preference would be that whichever tag, the tags you're using, should be first the faction tag or the community hub tag, then the time zone tag, followed by either if you're milsim, casual, or semi-milsim, and then you can add any two of the above. You can either add region locked and then add any of the lore focus, beginner friendly, or you can add lore focus, beginner friendly, and not add the region locked, right? But remember, only 5 tags can be present per post. So use your tags wisely. Now, one more tag is present among these few, but this tag is not noticeable in the selective menu. This is because only moderators are allowed to give this tag. But this tag is present in FAQ advertising. You can click this tag to see the factions below it, but you cannot put this in your faction. So what is this tag? This tag is the official faction tag. And you might be wondering, what is official faction? So in the gist, official faction is a faction that is officially, you could say, officially affiliated with the PL5. So PL5 will give resources to them, you could say, in a way, and will help them or get help from them actually, not help them, but get help from them in different kinds of events and all that kind of stuff. So that is what official faction is. I'm going to just stay in the gist of it. I'm not going to go into detail because official faction there's a shit ton of official stuff you need to know about official factions and stuff. Not just this. This is just the definition. You could say it's an official faction is a faction that is officially tied with PL5. It's just officially, you could say, um, like you could say tied to PL5. Like PL5 interacts with this faction indirectly or directly, right? More directly than indirectly. So there's a lot of stuff in official factions, though. Um, and so obviously that'll be for a different video. And I'll be talking about a lot more stuff about how to become an official faction, what things are there in an official faction, because I myself am in an official faction, so I have knowledge of it. Um, but that's for another video. So, anyways, moving forward to the next part is what should I know before I start the faction? Now, if you click on faction info, right now, let's head to the PL5's faction category. In that, if you click faction info, there should be a link which says faction guidelines. If you click that, then it will open up the faction guidelines that all factions follow. These guidelines are followed by every single faction that are advertising in PL5. It is pretty much like a set of rules that factions must follow. So, for example, a faction cannot be made on controversial topics. So, you cannot make a faction that is basically um, connected or correlated to, say, Wagner Group, right? Or you cannot make a faction that is symbolizing or basically connected to, directly or less indirectly to the Germans in 1939, if you know what I mean, right? Or the Soviet Union. So that's not allowed, right? You cannot do that. So if you do that, then the faction department will find you, and then your faction gets blacklisted. Now, what does blacklist mean? Blacklist means that you are completely cut off from the faction community, the PL5 faction community. So you cannot interact with any and all factions that advertise in PL5 faction community. And if you are caught interacting with that faction, then that faction will also be blacklisted. You could say in a form that it is exiling that faction or that person from the faction community and cutting their entire relations with the faction community off. So they cannot do joint operations, they cannot, discuss shit, they cannot do internal events for or using any other faction that is connected to the PL5 and is not blacklisted. So yeah, any faction that is blacklisted, obviously they can't. Common sense. Um, now so there are three guidelines you need to follow. The first guideline is the PL5 faction guidelines, right? That is the whole document with, I think, C1 1 to C1 like 11 or something. So there's a bunch of stuff. You can, of course, have a nice read at it. Another guideline that you should follow is the advertisement guidelines. So how do you check the advertisement guidelines? Basically, it's pretty simple. You need to go to FAQ advertising, and then you need to go to advertisement guidelines. It should be pinned with the info tag. You simply click the info tag and it will direct you to the advertisement guidelines. Read this entire thing. Read the whole advertisement guidelines and read it thoroughly. And if you have to, memorize it because it is very important. And it is basically the rules that you have to follow when you are advertising a faction. So, for example, if you are advertising a faction, you are only allowed to post that faction every 12 hours. If you break that rule, if let's say you posted one advertisement, then you waited around on, let's say, 10 hours, even if you waited like 10 hours and then you advertise your faction again, you will still get slammed for that, and your advertisement will pretty much get removed for breaking the guidelines. There's a lot of other stuff as well. For example, your faction should be formatted. Your faction should give a disclaimer if you're using the region lock tag. And your faction should also not have weird titles. So, for example, your faction title should be searchable. You shouldn't use any weird, custom pins and custom Unicodes and all that kind of stuff, which in some way would hinder people from searching your faction. And your faction should also disclose if you are using any kind of AI content, be it AI logo, AI formatting, AI imagery for advertisement pictures. Any form and all forms of AI must be disclosed in the advertisement itself in big and bold letters. You can't advertise it in like very, very small pixels. Otherwise, it will still flag up on the PL5 faction department's radar. So make sure that if you're disclosing AI stuff, do it in big and bold. Use the hashtag for that and use the double colon, inside double colons in order to make it bold. But make sure you do that, otherwise it will still get flagged despite disclosing. And yeah, it's just more visible that way. Anyways, that's mostly on to the guidelines. There's also the RGE guidelines. That is, if you're making a map, like a custom map for your faction, it should follow specific guidelines. So, for example, under the Geneva Convention, you cannot use the Red Cross. So it's not allowed according to the Geneva Convention. So if you are caught, if your build is caught having the Red Cross on it, or something like the Soviet Red Star on it, then you will be caught and you will be basically warned or blacklisted for it. So be careful when you're doing stuff. Make sure you're following the guidelines and have 2 to 3 reads of it if you have to, but make sure you're following the guidelines because it is very important. And even one blacklist can pretty much screw up the future of your faction tenfold. Trust me when I say this. Okay, it can literally screw up your faction quite a lot. So make sure that you do not break any of these guidelines, not even once. Otherwise, a lot of bad shit can happen. Moving forward to what will be, I think, the last thing I want to say for faction stuff, and that is going to be any tips, right? Tips and few tips before you begin your faction. First things first, make sure that you get experience on faction leadership by joining existing factions and good factions and becoming an high command in them. So, because again, there's a lot of things inside factions that you need to know that are basically shadow things. So, for example, joint operations, right? There's a lot of things you need to know on how joint operations are done, what things need to be done in joint operations, like using hammer time and etc. etc. That you cannot, learn by simply making a faction and starting things off. You'll only be able to learn that by not just joining a faction and being a soldier, but by being an officer, right? So, obviously, this is a tip. A lot of people usually just start their faction instantly. They don't like wait to be a high command in a faction and then start their faction. They just instantly make their faction, which I don't blame them. It's just if you do start your faction that way, there's a very low chance it will actually succeed because you don't have the perks, you don't have the knowledge or the connections to make that faction happen. So there's a high chance that it will fail. And what I mean by fail is that it will get like maybe 20 members to 30 members in a span of 2 to 3 weeks, and then people will just not join. Like they'll just leave the faction. So obviously, this is a big tip, is join an existing faction, get experience, then make a faction by yourself, right? Another thing is that if you are making a faction, you need funds, okay? There are three important things you need if you're making a faction: time, money, and most important of all, um, dedication or willpower, basically, or commitment, rather, right? You need the time, you need the money, and you need the experience or the willpower or the commitment, right? Because if you do not have any of these three, then it's pretty much going to be a waste of your time. I'm being very real with you. If you do not have any of these three, especially the money, then building a faction is going to be a waste of your time. No matter how much time or commitment you may have, if you don't have money, if you don't have funds, if you don't have investors, it's going to be a huge waste of your time. So might as well just not and like join an existing faction instead, and be a high command in that faction. Uh, so yeah, that's one tip I would give. Another tip is if you really need some people to help you out, you should definitely make some friends in PL5 and like invite them into a faction. So like gather a bunch of competent friends that you have or may have and use that in order to basically like assign them to positions, right? Again, of course, under their consent, but yeah, basically recruit them into your faction and get them into positions because having friends in high positions really helps with the trust thing, and it really helps with having lesser trust issues and also having workforce. So again, if you are joining an existing faction and make getting experience, you will also make friends, right? So for example, let's say you join a faction XYZ, right? And you get experience from it. You will eventually in your journey make some friends out of the faction XYZ, right? Let's say you make a friend A, friend B, and friend C. And let's say out of that, friend A does not want to make a faction, but friend B and friend C is interested in making a faction. So then you instantly get two leadership officers, and if they're both competent officers, your faction will be going swimmingly. One last thing before we end the video is if you are a small faction, do not forget to um reach out to like bigger factions, right? Like IRRG, Tenacity Contractors, um, Meme Force One, La Legion, Sea Squadron, all that kind of stuff. Because if you do operations with big factions, you get a lot more reach and you get a lot more um overall PR, right? So for example, I'll take the example actually case study you could say of USMC, United States Marine Corps faction, which did an operation with Blackout, the biggest faction in PL5, and they got two videos out of that, and the videos got a bunch of views, and they got a bunch of growth out of doing an operation with the biggest faction in PL5. So yeah, it actually does count, and so you should, if you are a small faction, definitely go about doing operations with bigger factions, because trust me, it works. Anyways, this is going to be the end of the first video. uh, I am going to be making a more refined video in the future because currently I do not have the resources to make a better video. So I will be making a refined video much more into the future, perhaps when I get the resources to do it. And I'll also be making a video on the official faction shit and the other stuff. I'll be making a video more going more intricate into the guidelines and all that stuff. But that's for, of course, another video. So if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And hey, it makes me a bit happy to see that my video gets a bit of reach. So as always, enjoy and learn a bit and, stay swifty. Goodbye.